Bryan, it's a pleasure to have you here on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast.
Pete, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and we haven't known each other before this, and kind of just in the last couple seconds, we're saying, hey, there's some commonalities for sure, and I think that we've got some interesting things to talk about today. And I love your business, GreenPal, and I think what a great concept. And why don't you give us literally 1 to 2 minute sort of education on what GreenPal is all about, what you've been doing with your business for the last 10 or so years.
Yeah, so GreenPal is like Uber, but for lawn mowing services. So if you have a house, you need to get somebody to come mow your grass rather than calling around all over Craigslist or Facebook or friends or family. You just pop your address in GreenPal. You'll get 3 or 4 quotes back in a few minutes. You can hire the contractor you want to work with and pay and schedule them right through the app. Everything goes well. You just set it and forget it. And it just happens like clockwork, like magic. GreenPal is a 10-year overnight success. My two co-founders and I have been at this for a little over a decade, and now we're in all 50 states, United States, doing multiple 8 figures a year in revenue. 32,000 contractors use the app to run their business, and around 300,000 homeowners use it to hire them. So it's working now, but the first few years were challenging.
Yeah, and that's part of the whole business process, right? Getting things rolling, getting over some of those humps, and understanding what it all means and putting it all together so that you can be an overnight success 10 years later, right, Bryan?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the idea that anything is an overnight success is a fallacy because you
Yeah,
always look at, you know, it might have taken them 2 or 3 years, but 7, 8, 10 years before that, they worked on this other thing that failed, or
exactly.
the thing was called something different, or it's always the product of like 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes it's combined. Like you said, you had partners, and sometimes it's combined knowledge, and sometimes it's just earned along the way, or whatever the case is.
That's
Sometimes it's
right.
paid for. Sometimes you're bringing in specialists to give you that too, right? In order to get the thing ramped.
That's right.
And there's no right or wrong way. I don't think it's just what's most comfortable for us to do it, and our limitations as we start things up and get things rolling.
Yeah, I think founding a business is basically going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. So,
Yeah, I like
so
that.
you're just working your way through, trying to push on this string, roll the rock up the mountain, however you want to, what
Yep.
metaphor you want to use. But
Yep.
that's really what it's like. And I think at times it can be daunting. It can
Mm,
be, you can feel like nothing's working. You can
yeah.
feel like, what am I doing with my life? And that's common. Well, every founder goes through that. But if you break it down into like almost like levels of a game, for me, looking back at 22 years of entrepreneurship, it always unfolded as like levels of Super Mario Brothers almost.
Yep.
Like focus on one level at a time, do what you got to do to get to that level, and then get to the next level. And I think a lot of us get hung up because we're worried about Bowser and when we're on level 1 or 2. And
Yeah.
when in fact, we just need to focus on getting through that level. And level one is what trips up most people because it's a lot. It's really hard getting your first 10 or 20 or 50 customers, but that's what level one is. Just do that. Don't worry about anything else.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like we were talking about just before we hopped on. It's this idea of focus on what matters. And what give me your sort of idea around what a lot of entrepreneurs do when they get going and they're maybe not focusing on what really matters, and they're focusing sort of on the fake work type stuff.
Yes, this is a trap that a lot of new founders fall into.
Hmm.
Myself personally, a
Yeah.
couple of times. When you are founding a new business, you can get this bright shiny object syndrome, and you're focusing on all of these things that don't matter. When in fact, the only thing that really matters is let's get 3 or 4 or 5 customers, and let's start learning from them. Let's start learning from are we solving a problem that people have that they want to pay for? Are we making more people happy than not? What how are we going to deliver that consistently for 20 customers? How are we going to train somebody else to help us do this? And looking at like how you deliver that consistency, how you build out those little routines is what matters at that stage of the game. Unfortunately, a lot of founders will, well, I need to set up my Instagram and my Facebook,
Yeah.
and then I need to like think about what my brand strategy is, and what does the what color should the t-shirts be, and what our business cards, what does that design need to look like, and what what is our culture going to be, and all of these things. Like that stuff matters at like different levels of the game. But right
Yeah,
now you're
for
on
sure.
level one. Let's focus on level one stuff. And most of the time, it's activities around marketing,
Yeah.
getting new customers, and then activities around feedback, learning from those customers. In levels 1, 2, and 3 of the game, pretty much all of your time needs to be spent learning from people who are using your product or service, and what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, and letting that improve the business. And that's simple. I know it might sound trite, but most of us put friction between us and our customer. They make it hard for the customer to tell them everything that's on their mind. Like if you respond back to their email, it's like no response at examplecompany.com. Like
Yeah.
that email needs to go to your email inbox because you need that feedback. So that's an example of like real work versus fake work. Fake work is stuff that's not going to drive the business forward and get it to the next level of the game.
Brian, you were saying about this idea around fake work and all this sort of. Why do you think owners like? I think when people get going, a lot of times they know what to do or they have a good feeling of what they should be doing. Why do you think they resort to doing that sort of stuff?
It's easier.
Right.
It's easier to burn yourself out and
Mm,
work 100 hours a week in the business and feel like you're doing the right thing, feel good about it, and feel like you've got your hustle card stamped,
yep.
versus spending 20 or 30 really good hours working on the business, developing the systems, processes, routines, standard operating procedures.
Exactly.
That's a lot harder than just jumping in the truck and going and taking care of a problem. And I've been guilty of this. And so in founding a business and running a business, you're dominated by things that are urgent but not important. So it's like all of like the little minutia of running the business. It's emails, it's phone calls, it's all these things that are urgent that have to be dealt with or should be dealt with right then and there. But in the long term success of the business are not important.
Yeah.
You have to figure out a way to remove yourself from that quadrant and put yourself in the quadrant of things that are important but not urgent. So your employee training system, how do you get somebody from you just hired them to professional in your industry in 2 weeks? And how do you do that like on autopilot? That might take you a year to develop, to literally maybe 6 months or a year to build it. And it's an important thing, but you don't have to do it today to run the business. And so that stuff gets oftentimes swept under the rug. It's the important work we're supposed to be doing, but we don't ever get around to. And that's how we get stuck in this rut of like, whatever level of the game you're in. And then that's how you get burnt out.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of businesses fail. And that's where a lot of people basically build themselves into a self-employment dynamic, not a business ownership dynamic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I've got a whole process, and sort of one of my main frameworks is called the 5 Ps, which is aligning your promise to your product or service and having the right process, the right people so that you can drive the right profit. And, it sounds a lot similar in that, especially that process component with the people so that we can align accountabilities and stuff. Having those decisions made at the lowest possible level of the organization are so important for you to be able to have the time to work on your business and not be putting out the fires, right?
Exactly. If somebody's listening to this, maybe they're in year one, they're like, "Hey, I'm just trying to hold it together.
Yeah, I get
I
that.
don't have time for any of this stuff."
Yeah.
And the reality is that maybe Monday through Friday is in the business. It's
Yeah.
just holding it together, making sure the shop gets opened or whatever. Saturday needs to be on the business. You come
Yeah.
in early, you stay late, you pick one part of the business and you try to develop a system around it. And then guess what? Sunday is on yourself. You're reading the books. You're listening to podcasts like this one. You're going to YouTube University. You're taking online courses because you have to level your skills up. So every founder is doing three things at once: in the business, on the business, and then on yourself. You got to be doing all three. You got to be dedicating time to all three, or else you won't get to the next level of the game.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And one of the things that happens too with burnout, when we were talking a little bit about burnout, but when people are feeling burnt out, they're not having any fun anymore. They're not feeling the vigor and the excitement and all this stuff because their body's drained. And when you're not healthy, mentally and physically healthy, it's hard to stay healthy, have a healthy business too, right? You're starting to feel this power and this burnout and getting drained. How do you continue to keep fun in the business and keep that excitement in the business when you're getting, for those entrepreneurs, those business owners that are feeling as though they're kind of up against a wall with some of this stuff?
Yeah, a lot of times in business, you got to go backwards before you can go forwards. And if you've brought the business to a point where you're burnt out and nothing is working, you almost have to take it backwards to a point where you have it working well, where it was fun, where it was running smoothly, and then build up from that foundation. And this has happened to me, a couple times in 22 years of business. When I was running my first company, it was a traditional landscaping company, and I had grown it to over 150 people. And I remember I was driving to the shop one day, and I had this knot in my stomach. I didn't want to go there.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to the place I had built, and I was like, "Man, this sucks. Oh, how did I get here?" And I thought, "Well, you built this. You get exactly the culture you deserve. You get exactly the enthusiasm you deserve from your people because this is just an extension of you." So I had to go backwards in terms of I had to like rebuild my perspective, my enthusiasm for the business, what kind of leader I was, how was I approaching this. I had to get rid of some people that weren't good fits. I had to get smaller in terms of a company size, figure out what was working, what I liked about it, and then do more of that. And so that's really, really hard to do. We really don't want to go backwards because it feels like we're giving up. But the reality is sometimes you have to do that in small business because you got to get it back to a point where it was working and where you were having fun. Because if you're not having fun doing it, if you're not having fun about the progress, if you're not having fun about the challenges the business is overcoming, then you're going to get burnt out. You're going to hate it.
And I couldn't agree more. I've certainly been down that route with the businesses that I've owned. Even the one that I currently own, we used to have 3 shoe stores. Now we have 2 shoe stores. We had to take it back down. It wasn't happening.
Nice.
And so we look at that, and now we're, doing better than ever with the 2 instead of having the 3. So sometimes bringing things back in order to take things to the next level is absolutely what's necessary. So I loved your analogy there, and I think it's certainly probably there's probably a lot of people listening that are going to associate with that too through the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship, right?
That's right, and it goes back to moving from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm is
Yeah, I like
part
that.
of it.
Mhm.
And it really is. Success is a lousy teacher. We only learn from the things that didn't work out. I bet that third location taught you a whole
Gosh,
lot more
sure did.
than the first two locations did. And so now when you get ready to open your third, fifth, and sixth or 10th
Yeah.
company or location, now you know how to do it better. Or maybe you learned, hey, I really just want to own the store. I don't really
Yep.
want to, and maybe you learn. So you learned something with that third location. And so sometimes we have to like reframe it and look at it that way. It's not happening to us; it's happening for us. Every bad thing that's ever happened to me in 22 years of business, 5 years later, I was always glad it happened. Always, it always made me a better founder. Always made me a better entrepreneur. Always made me a better business. The reality is, most of the time, these things actually build you a stronger company.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's great. Well, thanks for spending some time with us here today on the Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast, Brian. And before we go, I want everybody to have the opportunity for you to sort of kick them over to your website again in case they want to get their lawn done and whether they want to explore a little bit more. I think your website's great, by the way. I was saying as we hopped on, it's like tick, tick, tick. You see them all happening, and it's awesome.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that, Pete. Yeah, anybody that doesn't want to waste time mowing your own yard and you want to build your business, just go on over to greenpal.com, pop your address in, you'll get quotes and you can hire somebody. Anybody wants to hit me up, Instagram's the best place to reach me. Bryan M. Clayton, just drop me a DM there.
That's awesome. Thanks again for spending some time with us here today.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. I had fun.